and get started. Hi, everybody. We're really excited to have you here. My name is Daniel Barrera Ortega, and I'm the program specialist here at the SGSO Network. I'm really excited to bring you this amazing presentation, Nurturing Diversity in School Gardens, presented by Honey Alexander, Program Director of the Young Gardeners Program at Galveston's own Farmers Market in Galveston, Texas. If this is the first time that you have ever interacted with the network, welcome. We're so excited to have you. The SGSO Network is a open peer-to-peer learning network for school garden professionals, and we provide professional development as well as free resources for folks that are providing programming either at the local, regional, or national level. And one of the ways that we provide free resources are free webinars as well as leadership for our amazing community members. So thank you all so much for being here. We're excited to be here with you. Next slide, please.
I'm working on it. There we go. Oh, it's not listening to me. There we go.
There we go. Awesome. So some general housekeeping, everybody. A recording of this webinar is being recorded. You will get the recording directly to your email on Friday, and this will also be posted in the SGSO Network recording library. So it's always going to be there along with the resource handout that I will tell you about in a second. There is also an associated, of course, anytime. We love recording things. There's also a resource handout that goes along with this presentation. These are resources from the SGSO network, as well as some that Honey identified as being important as we dive deeper into this topic. So these are really amazing resources put together by both of us to support the learning both now and beyond. And it also includes the slides if you would like to follow along. The link to the resource handout is being dropped in the chat right now. You can expect to be here for 75 minutes. We would love to have you the whole time, but it's okay if you have to go. So we understand. And the breakdown of these 75 minutes will be an hour of content followed by a 15-minute Q&A at the end. So if you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat as they come up, or use the Q&A function at the bottom of your Zoom bar. There should be a Q&A function, and you should be able to submit questions to it. We will get to them at the end of the presentation. And I will share more about this at the end of the presentation. We do love your feedback. We want to know how you like this presentation. We would love to know what you want to see in future webinar series. So more on that at the end of this presentation. Some other announcements is the SGSO Network has peer learning communities. These are member-proposed, member-managed, member-organized communities that come together based on role, on role type, organization type, or any specific topic or identity in the form of an affinity group if it's an identity. I pulled out, these are some examples of peer learning communities that are relevant to the topic today, but we do have a full roster of peer learning communities that are not listed here. So if you're interested, I will share the link in the chat again for the resource handout. There we go. Sorry, distracted. If you'd like to join a peer learning community, please scan the QR code or use the link that is being dropped in the chat as well. And if you would like to start a PLC, peer learning community or affinity group, you can send us an email at info@sgsonetwork.org, and we can talk next steps on what that can look like. Next slide, please. This is also a reminder that we have an open house coming up next week on February 26th, which is Wednesday from 11 a.m. Pacific, 2 p.m. Eastern. And this is a really great opportunity for you to get to know, if you're newer to the network, what resources we have available, as well as ways for you to get involved. Also, old timers in the network, you should definitely come. Our resources are always changing, and we're going to share more about a really exciting project, our school garden mapping project, which is being funded by the USDA, from the school grants. This is a really amazing project where we'll be mapping where school gardens are happening. We'll be collecting data and feedback, feedback from the community on what we would like to see, how we like to use it, and it'll generate an interactive tool that you can use through our website as well. And as always, we provide lots of time for folks to connect one-on-one or in small groups in different capacities. Next slide, please.
Daniel, I just want to say there's a couple of people saying that they can't see the links.
Oh, I see it
I'm not
now.
sure.
Thank you so much. I am sharing them in the chat. Yeah, it was the chat function. Uh, there we go. I think everybody should have them now. Awesome. Thank you, everybody. We love advocating for ourselves, of course. It's teamwork makes the dream work. And very last, before just a couple more things. We are hosting an in-person gathering in Orlando, Florida. We will be attending the Green School Gardens Conference. And at this conference, or for anyone that is either attending or living in the Orlando area, this is a great opportunity to get to know folks in person, also over really delicious food. So if you live in the Orlando area, know someone that might, or you're attending this conference, please follow the link that will show up in the chat in a second. To register, this will be on Tuesday, March 4th from 7 to 9 p.m. It's a $15 reservation ticket. It includes a full dinner, and we will be having dinner in smaller groups as well. So great way to connect in smaller groups with fellow school partners in person. Excuse me, I have something in my throat. Next slide, please. And the very last thing, this is a reminder that this is part of our Growing School Garden Summit webinar series. These are all amazing presentations that happened back in March in 2024 at the Growing School Garden Summit and happening in partnership with the SGSO Network and generously funded by the Sprouts Healthy Communities Foundation. So this is a great opportunity for folks that weren't able to attend to see the amazing learning that happened at the conference, as well as for folks that were there. If you missed the presentation or want to refresh, this is a sampler of some of the well, all presentations were great, and some of these, it's like a little taster of the amazing learning that happened. That is enough from me. Thank you all for being here and for bearing with me through this. And I'm really excited to pass the mic on to our amazing presenter of today. Take it away, honey Alexander, everyone.
Well, hi, everybody. I am so excited to be here. And truth be told, just to get all this out the way, I am a little bit nervous. I'm excited, I'm nervous, I'm thrilled to be here. No matter how many times I talk to people, my pinkies go numb. So I just wanted to be very transparent with you so you can breathe with me as I go through this. And if I stumble in the beginning, just offer me grace. So I am Honey Alexander, and I am the program director for the Young Gardeners program, and that's part of Galveston's own farmers market. And the farmers market's been around since 2012, and I have been blessed to be a part of it since about 2018 when I started as a volunteer, really just trying to get into the community. And I became a volunteer for the program and then soon became a garden leader because I loved what they were doing so much that I was able to jump in and start teaching kids about gardening and fell in love with that. And then after that, I was offered the opportunity by the then program director, Nan Wilson, to take over as program director in 2021. And it has been a tremendous and amazing ride ever since then. And we started with just one school garden in 2017, and we've grown to 9 to 10 school gardens. Things have changed in the Galveston community a little bit, but we still have 9 functioning school gardens here that we're still growing in, sharing the food and sharing education with the kids and the community. So I'm just ecstatic to be a part of that. We also started the Students for Eco Empowerment and Diversity, or SEED, high school internship. And the first cohort, the 5th cohort starts tomorrow. So we're excited to have 6 more students be part of our sphere of influence and environmentalism and all of the good stuff that we do here in Galveston. And so we reach more than 600 students a year through our after-school program, but it's even beyond that because we offer food. The food that we grow in the gardens, we have an opportunity to provide that to the students in the schools during lunchtime. So they get to sample vegetables that they may never have tried before, or that they haven't tried in this particular way. So each month we reach more than 1,000 students here on the island and offer them fresh veggies, and so that they can get a taste of what it's like to grow and taste your own food. And I'm excited to say that I've been a speaker at the Growing School Garden Summit for the last 2 years, the first and second years of it. And it's been an amazing adventure. And I met some of you all here, probably I've seen and met there. And it's just been a wonderful and an amazing relationship that we've built together. And I just can't wait for all the excellent things that are still going to come out at the next summit. And of course, I'm a community activist. So enough about me. I am glad that you are here. And I'd like to just kind of check in, and if you could check in with me on the chat, tell me how you're feeling about this webinar, how you're feeling today, if this is something that you are that you're excited about. Are you nervous? Are you curious? Are you intrigued? What are you thinking? What are you feeling? Okay, I see excited. That's awesome. Curious. I love curiosity. Curiosity is what I think for topics like this, it's so good that people are intrigued and curious and motivated, because that's what gives you the opportunity to learn, grow, and expand. Hopeful, good, open to learning. Ooh, nervous about larger issues. I love that. I love that you all are being vulnerable in there and saying you're nervous. It is a nervous topic, right? In the world that we're in right now. But it's so important to understand and represent all students that come through our gardens, ourselves and our colleagues and the people in our community. You have school gardens and you want to use them in ways that educate the whole community. Excellent, excellent. You all, those are great. And I appreciate the feedback. Thank you, cousin. I see you. So I just want to dive right in. Thank you for feeding back. And I just tell you a little bit about this picture. This is an amazing picture, and these are actually real people within our community. The carrot is Nan Wilson, and she's the person whose place I took, but she spearheaded the starting, along with Casey McAuliffe, the starting of the Young Gardeners program. And she's an amazing character. And then that's Jana Banana. And this was at one of our community gardens in Crenshaw, here on the island. It's an annual garden that we have. We have a veggie, we call them veggie patches. And every year we go to Crenshaw and they grow and sell the produce that the kids grow. And this is how we get interest in the gardens, and they dress up as fruit. So okay, so in this, what I'm going to talk about today is truly nurturing diversity and inclusivity in your school gardens, and the importance of examining and reviewing and acknowledging all the amazing differences that your kids have within the school gardens. And so when you think about this, a lot of you said that you would be curious, intrigued, motivated, that you want to make your school gardens better. So here's some questions to think about along the way as we go through. As we go through some of the things today, I just want you to kind of keep these in the top of your mind. How much better would your garden be if all the children in your garden were giddy about their experiences? I know that we at the Young Gardeners program, we reach out to the community often, a lot. We're constantly engaged with our school district and our community. And one of the things that is always the driving force is that the kids love what we do. Anytime we go to schools, the parents love us, but the kids, when they see us in the school, they all call me Miss Honey. And they're like, Miss Honey, Miss Honey. Or they say, are you the garden lady? You're the garden lady. Or you're the lady who feeds us food at lunchtime. They're excited to see us, and we want to make sure you have that same experience. And I'm working my slide. So two came out at once, but that's okay. Every child and adult who encounters your garden feels important and empowered. How much better would your garden be if everybody felt empowered in your garden? And that's a strong word, and I'm using it that intentionally. And how much better would your garden be if your curiosity creates a powerful gardening experience? And this is a big one. I'm brave and bold when creating a welcoming and inviting experience. Sometimes it does take bravery to make a gardening experience powerful and dynamic for all of the people who experience that garden. And sometimes it's the hard work that needs to be done that will make the gardening experience even better. So for today, the things that I always say is listen for the whispers and learn to unlearn. And what do I mean by that? Listening for the whispers are the things that people don't say out loud, the things that the children don't say out loud when they're struggling in the garden, the things that that child who's not engaging, what is that child not saying by their inactivity? Are you thinking that they're sullen? Are you thinking that they're avoidant? Or are they telling you something about their engagement that maybe you could listen more closely for and find out? And learning to unlearn. We all live and have experiences within our communities, within our friend groups, within our work groups and colleagues, and we get used to the habits of those people within our groups. We get used to the things that we've learned in the past. And sometimes we all have the opportunity to think that the way we learned it, the way that we engage in life, and the way we do things is the best way. And this today is to challenge you to unlearn all of those things and learn something new. Be curious and be intrigued about the people around you. I'm gonna take a half a second here and just look a little bit at some of the comments. I don't want to miss anything. Okay. And the vulnerability, that part is really important, because to say that you don't know something means to be vulnerable, right? To walk into a space and say, I don't know what I'm doing, and I know that everyone in my garden is not having the experience that I want them to have, and I want to do something better. That takes bravery, and that takes being vulnerable, and that takes being honest and self-reflective. And that's what's important now today, moving us into this topic, because there are going to be moments where we're all uncomfortable, right? We all have biases about things. You know, some people have been gardening their entire lives, so they know everything about the soil and the nutrients in the soil, or they know which plants can be planted during what season and which ones thrive in certain regions and climates. Not everybody knows that. One of the things that I put in my introduction is that I'm an accidental gardener. I have not always gardened. I played in the garden a little bit with my mother when I was a child, but there were years where I lived with uh, without access to green spaces. And so I didn't learn how to garden. And when I came here, I began to garden. And I didn't know everything, and I still by a long shot don't. A lot of my colleagues still teach me things almost daily. But being vulnerable and being able to say, I don't know that, I don't have that experience, is what it's going to take to get us to the other side. And so one of the big parts about making sure that gardens are reflective of your community are having representations in your school gardens and within your atmosphere that show those students who they are. Some of a lot of times people think that if you just bring a program around, then all children, all people will feel like it belongs to them. But that's not actually true. That's not what we've learned from just the way that the environmental works out. It's historically lacked diverse representation, and it's still that way. I've gone to many a garden conference, many a school education system, and most of the people, by and large, are white women. And I'm going to speak candidly while I'm here, and I hope you offer me grace if I misspeak. But most of them are white women. And I don't always see myself or the community that I represent reflected in the garden uh, field, and I'd like to see that change. And it takes intentionality. One of the things that we learned is early exposure to diverse environmental roles can change all of this. And that's what we're doing at the Young Gardeners program where we are and what a lot of you are doing within your gardens. We know that if you get a child to eat a vegetable or a fruit that they've never tasted before, if you get to expose them to that fruit or vegetable on a regular basis, they'll be more inclined to eat it, to talk about it, to recognize it when they see it in the store. The same is true for people, right? If I go to a if I'm a child and everybody that I see is white or they don't look like people in my community or my culture, I'm not going to feel like that is something that I can aspire to or I can reach for. So we want to change that. We want not only for the children to understand the health component of gardening, but the real life application to understanding they can reach beyond by being exposed to and seeing people just like them excelling in positions just like that. So by doing that, we build a stronger environmental stewards. I'll tell you a quick story. When I was one of our gardens, Rosenberg, that's now closed, that school is closed, but the garden is still thriving. I pop into the gardens at various times and places. And I went into this garden one day, and as the little kids came out, these are elementary students, they were coming out into a garden and they were all in line, and I was standing in the garden and I was waiting for them. And so what happened was one little girl came out to me and she looked at me and she said, and I was like, what? And she's like, Miss Honey. And she put her arm next to mine and she said, we're the same color. And I was like, yes, sweetheart, we are. And the other one grabbed my other hand and said, Miss Honey, your hair looks just like mine. And I said, yes, it does. And those two girls stayed by my side and took me around that garden and showed me what they were growing and showed me what they wanted to plant and gave me inspiration about what they're taking from the garden. So not only did those little girls learn about their own health and how to grow their own food, but they also saw someone who looks like them doing something that they also found love in. And now my computer is like acting really weird. Sorry. I apologize. Okay, there we go. So we want to plant seeds of belonging. The way that we plant seeds of belonging is by making sure students feel connected to their garden and to the people in the garden. And some people, like I said, I'm an accidental gardener, right? As an adult, I became more interested in gardening. And I won't say my big old age, but it's been a lot of time from the time I gardened with my mother to when I became this wonderful accidental gardener. So if you feel less connected to the garden, you're less apt to be part of it, right? A lot of times people come into gardening spaces that have been doing it all the time and just assume that everybody's gonna fall in love with the garden. And one of the things that we've learned through watching children and adults is people don't fall in love with the garden just because you say garden, right? People are like, yeah, I want good food. Yep, I enjoy a good salad. But they're not necessarily falling in love with or feeling connected to the garden until we take them out to the garden and have them taste, touch, smell, walk around the garden and make a connection to it, and then it changes them. So we want to continue to do that with the kiddos as they come out into the garden. And just like I was saying, the prior experiences shape how students engage with nature. And this is a big one. And so this is one where you want to kind of take a little deep breath and just hear what I'm about to share with you. Prior experiences shape how students engage with nature. And that doesn't mean prior experiences within their lifetime. That could potentially be the experiences that their family has had with gardening over time. Now, what do I mean by that? my family, of course, I'm African American. So, and I'm in Galveston. So there's a large history here um, with the working of the land from enslaved people. So you've got generations of people who had to work the land. And then now we're starting new generations of people who want to work the land. But changing that historical context is what becomes challenging sometimes, because as the people who work the land, and there are Native Americans who have the same similar experience, Mexican Americans, Spanish speaking, Hispanics, Latinx people who working the land has a history, a stigma of being negative, of being a lower caste type job, or something that you were forced to do. So that can carry with it shame, that can carry with it ancestral shame or historical shame that have nothing to do with that child or the people who are there now, but they carry it from their ancestors. Part of being a good garden leader, someone who wants to have a very diverse and dynamic garden, is recognizing and acknowledging that those feelings exist, and maybe helping those students to overcome that by talking about the current things that happen within a garden, the historical, the bravery that it has taken for the ancestors to have worked the land, overcome, and still want to thrive and make a living out of this, enjoy feeding their families from this, and use this as an opportunity to take back what their ancestors did for so many years before colonization happened, and say, my family thrived on this back in our original countries, or in this country as the Native Americans were here. Take that pride back and then turn it into something good and powerful. And so that's the take a deep breath in on that, and be willing to and be brave enough to bring in books and videos and people within those communities to talk about and share about their ancestral relationships with gardening, farming, and the like. Is everybody still with me? Everybody breathing through that? I know that's a lot. And so that goes into the third point, is not every child sees gardening as for them. And some of that has to do with the historical parts of gardening, right? But there's so much more, so many other ways that aren't necessarily, that it may not have to do with ethnicity or cultural background, but just where you grew up, right? Where did you grow up, and is gardening for you? Some people look at gardening as predominantly a female thing, right? There are stereotypes around that. Some people see gardening as, just a means to an end. They just need to go to the grocery store and get their food, and they don't see the importance of gardening. So if that's the household that some of your children are being brought up in, they may come with a stigma or a learned way of being that they don't even know where it came from. It's just what they know. So part of our job as these wonderful leaders is to help reframe and give them additional information to what they're getting at home. And just a second, I don't know what is up with my computer. There we go. So we want to break down some of these barriers. So, and in order to do that, we've got to recognize what some of them are. And there's limited cultural relevance in garden design, right? So when we design our gardens, there's a lot of school gardens that were maybe built and designed by whoever decided to put that garden there. And sometimes it's important to realize, was this something that was done to the community, or was it done with and for the community? And by that, I mean, a lot of times people will come into a space with every good intention of wanting to help, every good intention of wanting to bring new experiences to within a community that may be and that they perceive as marginalized or underprivileged. but they don't involve the community. They don't take into consideration the historical past, the traditions within that community, and they start doing things without the involvement. And that one is one of the things that we all want to be aware of when we go into different communities and try to help and determine, are we asking them for help, or are we giving them help that we think they need? So unequal access to leadership and decision making, which is the next part. Who makes the decisions about what will happen in that garden? Who makes decisions about what will be grown and taught in that garden? Are we involving the community? Are we involving the students? Do the students get a say? Do they get to say what could be planted? Do we ask them how they grow food? Do we ask them what foods they eat in their homes? Those are all important things to deciding if or not a student will be engaged in the garden. Because if it doesn't reflect anything about them, why would they care to be there on a regular basis? Assumptions about gardening knowledge and experience. And I touched on this a little bit, but not everyone has been exposed to gardening and fresh foods. When you think about food deserts, we'll talk a little bit about that, but when you think about food deserts and food apartheid and food justice, there are communities that just don't have grocery stores and fresh food available on a regular basis. A lot of times they get their foods from corner stores or sometimes gas stations and fast food. So they might not see a carrot with the actual carrot top still attached. They might not see a whole radish, a fresh radish. And so we've got to be aware of that and continue to use our gardens as a learning experience to bring open-minded intrigue and curiosity to those foods instead of assuming that everyone should already know what foods are, are fresh vegetables. And again, I'm going to talk about the multicultural representation in lessons. Looking at the curriculum, what are you teaching your kids from the curriculum? What books are you using? In those books and stories that you tell, are they told from one worldview, one community person's view, or are they told with the intentionality of including all cultures, within the intentionality of making sure boys, girls, non-binary, that Black, brown, biracial children are represented, are talked about, are discussed as actual gardeners and seen and known as leaders in the gardening field or just in life in general. It's important to show the power within all people instead of continuing and perpetuating the idea that only certain people go into and become leaders. So representation and food equity. This is this topic is near and dear to me because it's one of the things that we talk a lot. I mentioned that we have a seed internship. That seed internship was started because we wanted to, as our Young Gardeners program began to grow, we realized that our students were beginning to age out, right? As they get older, they were learning from third grade on up, but we didn't have an access into our high school in a way that we wanted to because our school was it's being rebuilt right now. As a matter of fact, it's being totally revamped, and there wasn't we didn't want to put a garden in and have it torn down as they do the remodel. But we still wanted to reach those students. And so that's how that program started. But one of the things that we learned was as we started reaching our high school students, we knew we had to level up the curriculum, level up what they were learning, make it real world, make it real world accessible to them, and tackle some of the real world issues that happen with food equity and representation. And so we wanted to talk to them. A lot of the things that we do is teach them about food apartheid and the realization of how food is available and not available, depending on where you live, depending on your proximity to farmers markets and farms and your economic status, right? Do you have the money, even if you live close to farmers markets or stores that have food, fresh fruits and vegetables, do you have the financial ability to purchase them? And so we teach that to the kids, and it's amazing the difference that it makes with them when they now become aware of their choices, the foods that they select, and how intentional they are about engaging within their communities. School gardens can introduce students to healthy and familiar foods. And one of the things that I mentioned a little bit earlier is cultural, the way people eat and experience food culturally is different from group to group. And we grow collard greens. Um, our collard greens right now are thriving. They're in the garden doing really well. And we do all kinds of things with those collard greens. But we are intentional about asking the students, how do you eat collard greens in your home? And if you've never eaten collard greens, well, let's try it. Let's get started. And we want to include all of those different ways. Some people eat them as in roll-ups, some eat them in salads, some people lightly saute them with garlic, some people make the whole full Southern style collard greens. There's so many different ways to experience one food and still get the health components from it that we don't want to accidentally or inadvertently leave out a whole cultural experience with a food because we haven't trained and taught ourselves all the different ways that that food can be prepared across different cultures. The USDA shows that BIPOC communities face greater food insecurity. And I think a lot of us within this field already know that. That's a very well-known fact. There have been many circumstances where people within the BIPOC, Black, Indigenous, people of color, that's what that stands for, have not been afforded the same access to work the land, to own farms, to get funding to support their farms. And sometimes within the communities, that means a reduction in their access to those foods. So if you don't have the money, you don't have the access, it's very difficult to get your hands on some of that good food. And that's why a lot of us are in this industry, because we want to make sure that people do have access to those. Now this this picture, cultural awareness is important, but this picture is really cool to me because we try really hard. These are a couple of our seeds or our interns from last year. And that is Henri and Alexa, and I don't know that chicken's name, but Amy Argubright is she's my cohort, and we do a lot of this together. And she brought her chickens, and our students got an opportunity to engage with these chickens while in one of our school gardens. And it's just absolutely amazing to see so many different cultures come together and talk about. Some of them have chickens in their backyards, and some have never even touched a chicken before and seen it alive. And so to see them talk about their family experiences with the chickens and the gardens is really fascinating, and it keeps us in a place of curiosity where we're learning right along with the students. Again, I'm going to say this over and over because I want to make sure that everyone goes home knowing this. Representation in the school garden fosters identity and belonging. I can't say it enough, and because that's true not just in gardens, but it's true in every aspect of our lives. And so we want to make sure we go over and over and remember that when we go back, that just telling people that somebody who looks like them doesn't have the same impact as seeing somebody does something that they're interested in doing it and excelling at it. It's you, they need to see it and experience it, because kids don't always do what you say, but they might do what you do. Modeling is how they learn a lot of what they do. They emulate and they model, and they try to be what they see. And so we've got to show them that they too belong in these spaces. Culturally diverse gardens help students develop emotional intelligence. I talk about the seeds a lot, but the interns, but we ask them at the beginning and at the end of their experience with us in their 6 or 8 week time, what did they get most out of the gardens? Of course, most of the people say that the kids say that they learned how to plant, they learned how to take their own, grow their own food, they tried food they didn't try before. But by and large, I will tell you that the students tell us that they learned how to find peace. They learned how to sit, I say sit in repose, but they learned how to just sit with themselves and find and calm themselves down within the garden space. We give them opportunities to walk the gardens, to journal in the gardens. We do breathing exercises and talk about emotional regulation within the gardens, because we want them to self-regulate. And there's healing that happens in a garden. And when these students are able to get their day interrupted, then and with something positive, they're going to have a better outcome that day and going forward. We know that Black and Brown students are typically sent to detention, in-school suspension, or expelled more often than their white counterparts for the same infractions. Not going to go into why all that happens now, but it's a statistical truth. Some of the things that we as gardeners can think about in those school spaces is, why is that child having a bad day? That child might be having a bad day because they've been sent to in-school suspension, because for the third day, they don't have on a belt to hold up their pants. But no one's taken into consideration the fact that they don't have a belt or the money to get one. And so now they're in trouble over and over for the same thing that they have no power to change. Or maybe there's that child who always makes a disruption in class, and they're loud or they're shuffling their feet, and no one takes into consideration that child might be hungry and is hiding the sounds of hunger in their body. So those are the kinds of things that I'd like us to kind of stop and think about. Why is that child? Be curious. Why is that child creating a disruption? Why is that child avoiding a certain class all of the time? Why is the child wandering the halls? Why is that child always in trouble for stealing food from the cafeteria? That child might be hungry. That child might have to deal with adult circumstances that they don't have any power to overcome. So think about all of those things, and we bring them out into the garden and we offer them food. They know they can go at any time and eat in the garden. They can journal. They can interrupt that negative impact that may have happened during the school day. And so the emotional intelligence and the ability to regroup themselves is widely impactful and useful in the garden space. Ooh, here we go. Okay. Speaking the same language. A lot of our kids, 40% of the students in Galveston are Latinx, Guatemalan, Mexican, Spanish speaking. And so we want to do things that allow them to be included, to show that we intentionally want them to be part of the garden experience. And so we do campaigns, we do everything that we do it in Spanish and English. We even have the curriculum in Spanish and English, and we have phrases for the garden leaders, so that they have a kind of a cheat sheet so they can speak a word or two, a phrase or two of the garden experience to bring the children in. And one of the things that we learned about the students in the program is, I learned it because I'm learning Spanish myself. My Spanish is not really good. I'm a Duolingo student. But when I go into the gardens and I attempt to speak it, those students become so empowered, because first I'll giggle at myself and they'll giggle with me, and then they'll say, no, no, Miss Honey, and then they'll tell me the proper word, and then they'll take me around the garden and tell me the Spanish terms for different things that happen in the garden. And now we've transferred power. Those students now feel powerful in this space where maybe other people don't necessarily bring them in. Now they feel empowered to walk around with me and teach me and talk to me and tell me about their gardening experiences and help me learn. And it's a safe space for them. And so there's so many ways to do that. We do the Three Sisters planting from the indigenous culture. We bring that and use that book over and over to talk about that book encompasses so many different relevant things for helping kids understand gardening, because it's the Three Sisters, or companion planting, right? They all work together to make the soil richer, to make each part of it grow longer. Excuse me. It's just so empowering for them to see the dynamic that happens in a garden is the same dynamic that happens in life. We all have to work together to make and enrich this world that we live in. And that book, Three Sisters, is huge for that. So I like I said, I know I'm getting close on time, but this part is important for me. The invited and welcome. I don't know how many of you have ever gone to a place where you've been invited, and when you walk in, you realize you're the only. Maybe you were the only man, maybe you were the only woman, maybe you were the only Black person, maybe you were the only white person. You walk in and nobody looks like you, but you're like, well, I feel awkward. I'm a little uncomfortable. I don't know, I've never been here before. And the person who invites you waves at you from across the room, but then continues their conversation and kind of leaves you to your own devices. That's a very uncomfortable feeling. And you were invited, but you don't really feel welcome. And we want to make the difference with our gardens of inviting them, and when I say them, anyone else who's different from who we are, inviting them into the garden and making them feel welcome. That's the difference between that person seeing me as being the only Black woman in a room, and they come over and say hi to me and introduce me to the group of people that they're speaking with, and make sure that I'm involved and welcome within the entire environment. And that's what we need to do with our students. Can we make them feel invited and welcome? There's nothing worse than being invited somewhere and having to sit on the periphery because no one's engaging with you. So inclusion means actively making space for every student. That's what we do with the Spanish language information. That's what we have with trying to have diverse books available. We have storybooks in Spanish and English. We have books about so many different topics of different ways people are in life, different ways people engage within their own cultures and with other cultures. And it's so important to make every student feel welcome. True belonging happens when students feel seen, heard, and valued. Do we see the kids? Do we see that child in the corner who's not engaging, and do we try to pull them in? Are we curious about why they're separating themselves out? That is what's going to make us powerful and have that garden that we talked about in the beginning. I told you I was going to say this over and over. Representation matters, and it creates connection. We talked about it a little bit. The cultural awareness builds respect and understanding. And inclusivity makes a garden safe and a safe and thriving space for all. When people feel included, they're going to take better care of what's happening in the garden. They're going to take ownership over what's happening in the garden, and they're going to want to see it succeed. And they'll do everything in their power to do exactly that. We've had kids do that. I'll tell one quick story. I said that we feed food to students during the school day. And there was one student. Now, some of these kids are involved in our garden program, and some are not. So what we do is we take. There was one student who had been in the garden program, and they were trying, we'll say, collard greens that we served them. And one child was saying, "This is like, oh, I don't want to try that." And the one student who had been in the garden program and said, "We took our time to grow that food, and we grew it so you can taste it. You should at least try it." They convinced and their other students, their other classmates to try the food, and they were proud of the food that they grew. So it creates that kind of a space. Now we're coming toward the end here, and I just want to take a quick poll question. Daniel, I think, is going to start the poll. Daniel, are you there?
Yes, I will.
Okay, thank you.
1 second. It'll be released right now. There we go.
Thank you. So if you all could take a moment and check in on this poll, I would love it. When students seem disinterested or disengaged, I leave them alone. True or false? When I feel an intense emotion towards someone or something, I check in with myself before reacting. I find myself engaging or calling on students who seem more like me.
Some answers are rolling in.
Awesome. Oops.
Awesome. So folks are answering. Wow, I'm really excited to share the
And
results.
okay. And while you're thinking about that, think about how you're feeling. Check in with yourself now about some of the things that we've talked about. How are you feeling? Are you curious about what you're feeling? If you're feeling a little intense, check in with yourself and ask yourself why and where it's coming from. Be curious with yourself as well.
Awesome. I'm starting to see a slowdown in reply.
Okay.
Maybe we can keep it open for maybe like 30 more seconds. So if folks haven't answered yet, highly recommend to do it. We will close out the poll and share the results.
Okay. And as people are finishing up on those polls, I'll move on a little bit. Where do we go from here? How do we start? This is the next row. Representation matters. Bring culturally different people, plants, and stories into your gardens. If your community is if you don't have anybody in your immediate sphere, go into the communities of the students that you serve and talk to their community leaders, talk to their people that they know, talk to their parents and bring them in. Redefine leadership. Rotate who gets an opportunity to lead in your gardens. That kid who always wants to lead, let them learn to be a follower. And that child who might be introverted and quiet could be a dynamic leader. They just do it quietly. Give them space and time to do that. Check your language. What words are you using? Are you using inclusive terms or are you using limiting terms? Are you using words for food types that you use that are common to your family, or are you using culturally rich words? And personal invitations. There's nothing feels better than being asked intentionally by using someone's name or noticing something about them and being direct and asking them to be part of what's going on and what you're doing. And asking the kids what they want. What do they want their garden to look like? What do they want to learn about? What do they want to cook? What do they want to experience? Ask them. All right, Daniel, we have a
Yeah,
poll.
we have a result, so I'm gonna share
Okay.
it out now.
All right, y'all, those are the responses. So when a student is disinterested or disengaged, I leave them alone. Good. I'm glad most people say false. Engage that student and find out why. Be curious. Be curious. When you're feeling intense emotions about yourself or someone else, you check in with yourself. Excellent. That's exactly what should happen. Check in with yourself and see where it's coming from first, because other people can make us mad, but why? Why did what, especially a child, why did what they say or did make us angry? That might be something that's going on in us. I find myself engaging or calling on students who seem more like me. If that's true for you, that's fine, but think about why. Probably because you're in a comfort zone. Something about that student or the way that they engage makes you comfortable because it's familiar. Do something different. Be curious and be intrigued about what that student who's not like you might be able to teach you. Thank you for those results. I appreciate it. So I know we're coming up to on the end, so I'll go over this really quickly, but learn to unlearn, review your curriculum, make sure it embraces the diversity and cultural relevance, especially how it looks about the students that are within your gardening program. Keep on learning, be curious, reflect often, look at yourself, look at your program, what's working, what's not. Are your kids giddy? And if they're not, why not? Are the families involved? Do the families get celebrated? Do they get to share their experiences? Do you celebrate diversity? Do you celebrate the different holidays and food types that happen during different celebrations within different cultures? And keep inviting people, keep inviting parents, keep inviting educators and administrators into your gardens. So try this tomorrow. Take these things back to your garden now. Greet each student in person by name. If you don't know all of your kids by name, learn those names or learn some quirky part about them that makes them unique and exciting. Start a conversation about cultural food traditions from the students. Observe who's participating most and who isn't, and be curious about both. Learn a different student Learn to let a different student lead each day's gardening task. Let them be in charge of something, empower them, and ask students, what would make this space feel like yours? I hope you all can try and start all of that. Try some of these tomorrow or today and make your gardens a better, more inclusive space and celebrate the diversity, just like the Three Sisters story. And remember, representation matters.
Please join me in thanking our amazing presenter today, Honey Alexander. Thank you so much, Honey. We're gonna move into our Q&A portion of this of our presentation today. If you have any more questions, please drop them in the chat as well as the Q&A function. But first, and this one came in really early, what are some key strategies to get garden produce integrated in the cafeteria?
Oh, that's a really good question. And we've worked with Galveston's own farmers market. We worked for a long time to do that, is creating and developing relationships. We applied for and received a grant through the USDA that allowed us to do this. So keep a lookout for grants and funding opportunities from different organizations.
Awesome. Thank you. There's another question on there's an attendee that really appreciated being able to focus on the equality with race. And they have a question about disability and students with specialized needs. Um,
Mhm.
Is there anything you could recommend for students that may have autism, wheelchair students, differently disabled students?
Oh, I love that question because absolutely. Some of our gardens, so what we do is we also have the sensory gardens. Some of our children are neurodivergent that come through the gardens on various on the spectrum and all over. And we have different kinds of plants because we know thyme and sage and different plants have different textures, different smells, different experiences. So we have textural things. Um, I saw in one garden, we don't have this yet, but I saw one garden where they have it, they had sign language in the garden. Their posters were in sign language. Our gardens are built with the expectation that a wheelchair or someone who needed assistance walking could fit through the between the garden beds. So again being intentional about how you build the garden, how high you build the garden, and making things that can be touched and felt where you don't even have to um, you know see them, you can feel them.
Awesome, thank you. And also, folks, if anyone in the chat also has any resources around working with a lot different of students with different cultures, as well as we just talk neurodivergent student with disabilities, feel free to drop them in the chat, and we'll add it to the final notes, the final resource handout. We'll update it. So please, if you have any resources or pages to check out, drop them in the chat, and we'll capture those as well. There,
Amber. Well,
yeah.
I'm sorry, Daniel. I saw this question from Amber that I think is really good. Would love practical tips for engaging multicultural families. You offer free items and open garden days and have people sign up, but is there a way to get people involved? That's excellent because sometimes just having something available doesn't make people feel welcome to it. It just says I have this thing. But sometimes going into the community, getting to know the people within those communities that you're attempting to serve, volunteer to help them with something, go support their events and do some reciprocity, get to know them, um, have the students bring their parents in for open houses or some of the things that you've offered, and then just know them by name, know them by community, and engage within the community.
Thank you for that question. There's another question around each racial group has a milpa companion planting trio. Have you heard of the three most cestas milpa of sweet potatoes, cowpeas, and okra? How do you bridge connection between students from different backgrounds?
Well, I haven't, but that sounds like a great way to do that by showing different kinds of companion planting. If you start with that book, The Three Sisters, and then research different ways that different cultures do something similar and introduce that, and maybe you can grow them at different times during the year or over different years, and then create foods around those things while introducing the cultural relevance as well. I love that.
Oh, I was muted. My bad. Thank you so much for that, honey. And somebody else asked, in my community, we have been experiencing increased hate speech and bullying for the past month. Do you have any ideas or suggestions on how to navigate this?
Ooh, that's painful, right? That's one of those stinging moments. And I think, sadly, I think we're going to be experiencing a lot of that. And I think a lot of it has to do with teaching the kids learning early. The earlier kids learn about inclusivity and diversity and the power of working together, they'll help and support and speak out for one another. It takes the voices of privilege and power to speak up with those who don't have that privilege and power. So the support has to be dynamic, and it can't come from just the people that are being oppressed or harassed. They can't speak up without the voices of the people who have the power to reflect back and change the voices of those who are harming them. So stand up together, unified.
That's so that's so important, especially in the climate that we have right now. Thank you so much for that, honey. Um, Somebody asked, explain companion planting again. And I wanted to add also, and this is related to nurturing diversity. How do you talk to students um, about companion planting, what it is, and how do you connect it to their community, if you
Hmm.
do?
Yeah, we have there is a book called Three Sisters that talks about companion planting, which I highly recommend. But what we do here is we held a field trip experience where we brought students in and taught them about companion planting. And basically what that tells them is that there are plants that you plant that cover the ground, like the squash. They grow and they cover the ground and they protect the ground. And then you plant corn. Corn grows up tall, and then you plant beans, and beans grow up the corn stalk. And so they provide different nutrients to the soil. They provide different shade to help retain water, with the squash staying there. The corn is the stalk, so the beans can grow up. So you're able to grow all these different foods while all these foods like and work and thrive together because they're able to work together in that one space.
Awesome. Another question just came in. One person can be all things to everyone, a gardener, an educator, being authentically culturally inclusive, organic gardener, etc. How do small gardens or project meet everyone's needs? How do you get to the person team that can address all the needs?
Ooh, another excellent question. Don't try to be everything. You can't be everything. You'll drop something and you don't need to be everything. You need to be your best you and know when you need support. And so that's when you go into the community, you go into the parents of your students and say, hey, can you talk about this? A lot of the parents of students are gardeners or their parents are gardeners because most of our kids talk about gardening with their grandparents. Ask them to come in and support, to volunteer, to give a talk one day, to prepare a meal with them. Bring in the support of those people around you and reach out and bring them in so you don't have to do it all.
Awesome. Well, honey, thank you so much for this amazing presentation. You are a leader and a trove of knowledge. So again, so much gratitude for you joining us here today. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, and thank you everybody for coming. And if there are more questions, I don't you get them to Daniel, and we can get them answered in another way. But thank you so much for the support. Thank you so much for being here. I appreciate you taking your time.
Awesome. If you can go into the next slide, just some couple final wrap-up announcements. Uh, Thank you all again so much for being here today. As always, and as I mentioned, we deeply, deeply, deeply value your feedback. So I'm dropping our feedback survey link in the chat. We'll reshare one that is clickable. You will also get a follow-up email with the recording of the webinar as well. So be on the lookout for that as well as any resources that were dropped in the chat in the past couple minutes. Next slide, please. And one more. And please attend our next webinar. Our next webinar on this series in Growing School Garden Summit will actually be based around working with students of a lot of different abilities. So it is titled Vocational Horticulture and Transition with Exceptional Students, Drew Horticulture, happening on March 19th, 11 a.m. Pacific, 2 p.m. Eastern. Please, we would love to see you back and again sharing all of these really relevant resources around really making garden spaces inclusive to all backgrounds, all abilities. Gonna try the survey link one more time. And next slide, please.
Sure.
Once again, thank you all so much for being here. Please connect with us at SGSO Network on Instagram as well as SGSO Network on Facebook. We hope to see you again very soon. And yeah, thank you all so much for being here. Hope to see you again soon.